Hello, welcome everyone. We're going to give people a few seconds to join in. We're going to have time at the end for a Q&A. So if you have any questions throughout the presentation, please add them to the chat. Make sure that you're sending the question to everyone and not just host and panelists so that we can all observe together. Um, now, yep, and as we wait, as people join in, please add in where you're calling from in the chat. I'm calling in from Montreal today.
Oh,
Rainy day.
nice.
Yeah, it's
Here in
rainy.
Orlando, it's lovely.
Oh, well, you guys have better weather than us. That's for sure.
Yeah. Let's see. 44 plus 30. It's about 74 degrees right now,
Oh, wow.
Fahrenheit, or 27 Celsius if you're a Celsius thinker like I am.
I'm in,
Knoxville, Philly, Pasco
amazing.
County,
We got
Pittsburgh,
people. Oh, we got somebody from Ontario too. Oh,
and
amazing.
Calgary,
In Calgary.
St.
There you
Louis.
go. Alrighty, so yeah, I'm gonna get us started. We're gonna not talk about the weather the whole time after all. Welcome to today's Tigerhall webinar. Our session features Connie Klimko, who is Transformation Lead at Siemens Energy. And today's topic is tackling the root causes of change resistance. Connie, take it away.
Thanks, Julianne. And hi, everybody. Gosh, I can see we already have 83 participants in this hour. So thanks for taking an hour out of your day on this topic. I hope that you find it informational and valuable, a valuable use of your time. So, as Julianne said, my name is Connie, and I am the transformation and change lead at Siemens Energy. And my role is to well, it's a number of things, but when I'm at my best, I and my team of more than 400 what we call transformation accelerators, who are people inside Siemens Energy who, in addition to their day jobs, get training on change and transformation topics and people and culture topics. But anyway, when I'm at my best on a given day, I'm having conversations with a leader or a team about a business problem that they're facing, and I'm helping them understand the culture change and transformation issues that are at the bottom of that business problem, at the root of that business problem. We call that the adaptive challenge that is facing, that's causing that business problem. And then we help, so we identify the problem and then we help remediate the problem through experiments, workshops, all sorts of different kind of interventions. So that's just a bit about what I do. I was saying to Julianne before you all joined that I think I have the best job in the world. So I'm super thankful to be able to do this full time. Now I'm trying to, there we go. My page down wasn't working before. So today we're going to talk about a change topic
I'm gonna
that,
interrupt you. Sorry, Connie, I'm gonna interrupt you for a second. The
sure,
slide doesn't seem to be changing on our side. Did you change the slide off of the Tigerhall slide?
yes, I've got a slide in front of me that says reframing resistance as a gift.
Okay, we
You
don't
can't
see
see that?
that. No, so do you want to try
Okay.
unsharing and then resharing?
Okay. Stop share. And then let's see here. Reshare. I can see the chat, but not a thing to reshare.
You should see it on the sidebar. Like there should be a bar where you can click chat, react, and share.
Okay, let me go into Zoom. So I have a work colleague who is signed on as me, and that might be because I forwarded her the invitation, and that might be causing it. So Misha, can you drop off the line and see if that fixes it? Okay. Now, what I see in the Zoom is I don't see any. Sorry, everybody. You know what we call this? We call this the technological vortex of evil, by the way, when we're in this type of situation. Let's see. Okay, well, should I quickly sign out and get back on?
Yeah, perfect. And also too, if you want, you can send it to me by email just in case the presentation, if it doesn't work, you can send me the presentation and I can move the slides up to you.
Okay. And everybody, don't worry because this won't take probably the full hour anyway. So we won't go over. Okay. So let's see how I get out. I can't even see how to get out. It's really strange. Um, Here we go. Okay. Leave webinar.
All right, we'll be back with Connie in a few seconds. Oh, that's a good piece of advice, Danielle. I'll ask her that when she comes back. Thank you. Okay, as we wait for Connie, how about you guys answer this question for me? What interested you about this topic? Are you dealing with change resistance? Are you just intrigued? Is change resistance something that you never have in your company? Yes, yes, Blake, I have a face. Yes, I exist. Usually in the background. So, has Connie been featured in the Only Constant? Yes, yes, she has. She does have an episode with us. Once we have everything set up, I will put that link in the chat. Somebody was asking Connie if you were on the Only Constant.
Yes, I was. I've been on twice, actually. Once about transformation accelerators, and once about one was called How to Flatten an Organization Without Breaking It, which was when we talked about when we ripped six layers of management out of our organization, and how we manage that from a change perspective. Okay, I'm going to try again with okay, and let me know if that works. Okay, and we can from current slide. Is that working?
Okay. Yeah, so try changing the slide just in case.
Okay. Does that
Yeah,
work?
okay. Oh, we're in business. Alrighty.
All
So yeah.
right, we're out of the technological vortex of evil, everybody. That's so exciting. And we even have more participants than we did when we entered the technological vortex of evil. Okay, so we're going to talk about resistance, right? And as change managers, resistance can often, especially when we get tired and overloaded, resistance can be kind of the head in the hand type of, oh, people aren't adopting this, they're really resisting this change. And it can often just be viewed by us and by leadership as a real pain. But in fact, it's a gift. And so we're going to talk about how we reframe the way we look at resistance and how we see the gift that it offers us. So let's see here now. You can see the next slide? Yes?
Yes.
Julian? Okay. So let's post in the chat in one word, how do you feel when someone resists a change that you are driving? Frustrated? Empathy. Nice. Curious. That's a good answer. Irked. Challenged. Here we go again. Informed. A wonderful challenge. Like my work is about to get interesting. Unhappy. What am I missing? Curious. Inefficient in that I didn't frame it in a way that they could expect. Well, everybody handles change differently, right? So it's kind of hard sometimes to be able to anticipate all the different ways that someone might resist. What have I done wrong? Puzzled, accepting, but tired. And it's how you learn and grow. Yep, those are all, there's no wrong answer to this. And it is hard to meet everyone's needs, Angela. And I think as a change manager myself, I certainly have felt all of those things. And in these days when change is just ever so constant, I mean, our CEO talks about, I mean, our company is doing really well right now, and our share price is currently like, I'm not kidding, like 20x higher than it was 3 years ago, because energy is such such an important topic that is growing so much. with things like data centers and AI, et cetera. But anyway, our CEO talks about, it's all fine until you get hit from the side. And when you think about, even especially in energy in the last few weeks, you can see that, I mean, that might be our hit from the side, but there's the change. There's just, you can't control it. It happens all the time. And there's change that, of course, we design and we implement, and that there's change that is implemented onto us. And people, we experience resistance in all those types of forms. But we're going to talk today about change that we implement, and how to look at that when we're encountering resistance. So Julianne is now going to put a poll into it should be popping up on your screen. I can see it. So what do you believe causes resistance? Lack of awareness, fear of loss, and a threat to someone's identity, trust gaps, past change fatigue or past change that didn't work, hidden loyalties. So I'm protecting something that's important to me. And you can put in the chat if you don't feel that anything in here is actually covered. Everybody's saying all so far. Not feeling like you are part of the change. The change is happening to me, or happening, being thrust upon me. Fear of exposure, fear and hidden loyalties, and loss of control. That's for sure. Disruption, deeper insights. Yep. So those are all great answers. So sorry, go ahead, Julian.
Yeah, I was just about to say, are we ready to see the results from the poll?
Oh, yes.
Amazing. Alrighty, you guys should see that now.
Okay, so the most is lack of awareness. Oh, no, sorry, fear and loss of identity threats. Yep. Past change fatigue is also very high up there. Yeah, so certainly, when we talk about, I'm trained in, I don't know about all of you on the call. We got 150, more than 150 of you. My change certification is in something, is in ProSci, right? And we talk about ADKAR within ProSci. I'm not sure how many folks are familiar with ADKAR, but that whole lack of awareness thing, so the first A in ADKAR is about awareness. And someone needs to hear a message around what is the change and why are we making it between 7 and 9 times before they really understand it. And too often, as change managers, we say it a couple of times, or leaders will say it a couple of times, and then expect that everybody gets it. So that, that lack of awareness then feeds into, and especially the awareness around why something is being done and what the benefits of the change are envisaged to be, often then feed into this fear of loss and identity threats. So thanks, Julianne, for running that. We'll go to the next slide. So let's reframe resistance as a gift, right? Because knowledge is always a gift. And if we can understand what is driving resistance and, the reasons behind it, that can really help us address it. Because almost all resistance, I mean, there are certainly some impacted people from change who will sort of never get on board, and we understand that. And there are some people who will always just adopt, be early adopters. But then there's a large part of people in the middle who will resist until we understand why they're resisting, and then we can try to address those problems, and then help them, support them in the rest of the journey so that they can actually adopt the change successfully. Hannah, the acronym was ADKAR, ADKAR. Yep, and I can see Marina and Danielle knowing that. So feel free to Google that. There's lots of, and you can go to the prosci.com website for more information about it. So let's look at resistance as a gift. So, resistance is feedback. It's not pushback. And the fact that we're getting feedback should always be appreciated and valued, right? Because then it helps us understand how we need to change the way we're managing the change. So every kind of objection that somebody would have maps back to a human need, and we need to listen and learn from people about what those objections are. So these are just some of the human needs that can be behind resistance. So safety, is my job safe? Am I personally safe? Am I physically safe? Am I psychologically safe? Um, is the recognition that I currently get going to disappear? Uh, if I have a lot of emotional power invested in my identity, and this change is going to affect what I perceive as my identity, I'm going to push back on that big time, unless I see it as an opportunity to reframe my identity. But in the first instance, I'll probably push back on that pretty hard. Predictability. I need things to be, people need things to be stable, to be predictable. And unfortunately, these days, that is fast disappearing. But if we can provide predictability in the way of helping people to understand that when there is a change, we will communicate as soon as we can, we will communicate transparently, we will give them plenty of opportunities to ask questions and take their feedback. If there can be predictable elements every time we change, then that can help a lot with that barrier. Competence. So do these people, first of all, is this change, am I going to have to learn new skills to be able to cope with this change and be able to adopt this change? And are the people managing this change competent? Do they know what they're doing? And often, if people perceive, well, always, if people perceive that those who are managing the change are incompetent, then they're going to push back big time. But then there is that level two of, is my own competence threatened? Am I going to need to learn something new? And can I learn something new? So for instance, with AI coming certainly in my organization, and I saw a great webinar here that Tigerhall did with the change management lead for Visa, where she talked about how they introduced AI into the organization. And they had an OKR around every single person being able to adopt one or more AI practices like within the next 6 months, and how they were able to introduce that in a way that helped people build up their competence and feel familiar with and not threatened by this technology. And they could see that as they began to use AI more, how much their productivity increased. And then belonging. Is this change going to threaten my sense of belonging to this organization? Is the change such that, for instance, is there going to be, for instance, with hybrid work, right, with working from home and working in the office, some people feel a better sense of belonging being in the office and being able to talk to people, while other people feel more belonging if they can absolutely have power and agency over when they come in, if they come in, those types of things. So these are just some of the human needs that are behind people pushing back and resistance. So what we're going to do now through the chat is I'm going to bring up some resistance statements that we often hear. And I'd love to see in the chat what need you think it's mapping to. And there's really no right or wrong answer. I'm interested to see how you view these things and how we as a group, view this. So the first is, we've tried this 3 times already. So which of those human needs on the right-hand side do you think, is mapped to that statement? Competence, fatigue, feeling heard, safety, stability, predictability, identity, safety, predictability and confidence. And I'd love to hear, this is kind of off script a little bit, but I'd love to hear from, in the chat, how many of you hear that a lot? Are you in organizations where people, you've done a lot of change and it hasn't always worked. And so people are, yeah, we're getting a few yeses, a lot here on many occasions. Yeah, and me too. Like in my organization, I hear this a lot. Um, and every time I hear it, I want to go back to that change and understand how it was managed to see where we need to improve. We centralize, then decentralize, then yep. When will it stop? That's so true, that pendulum. And that's Chuck, that's a great question. How has this gone for you in the past? And not to be uh, pushing ProSci so much, but ProSci actually has a great risk analysis where you plot kind of what is the level of risk of this change. And, on one axis, you've kind of got complexity. And on the other axis, you have how many times have, how much change fatigue is there and how many times have changes, not been successful. And that'll help you understand how much risk there is, in the change you're trying to manage. Okay, we're going to go to the next one. I just want to see that Brenda one. We have a large percentage of long-term employees, 20 years plus, and they like up to bring the change up that 15 years ago didn't work. Fair enough. Fair enough. Okay, my team is already overloaded. Danielle, great to know that you're using that ProSci assessment. I use it all the time too. So safety and stability. That's what I would probably choose myself, that hey, you're making us unsafe here. We're already having work-life balance problems. We're already, at a burnout risk. So we're not safe. And we need to, don't just put this on us. So in Siemens Energy, we're introducing OKRs to every part of the business. But one of the things that we're making sure of is that we get rid of any redundant or repetitive, anything that looks like an OKR type of, which is called objective key results, right? It's a way that you set goals. And for this to be accepted, we had to make sure safety in two ways. One is we're not asking you to do this on top of the way you already set goals. This replaces what you do. But also, we had to ensure there was psychological safety so that if someone tries to drop in additional work on the team, they had the psychological safety to say, this doesn't align to our OKRs, and so it's not going to get priority. So, there's different kinds of safety that people need, in a change. Okay, the next one, this threatens quality. Where do we think that maps to? Identity, competence, safety, competence. Yeah. So, often when we hear that, we need to listen because maybe it does threaten quality and we haven't thought about that. Sometimes change is designed by people who may not understand the what it's replacing in terms of, okay, what is the outcome going to be around quality? You might be more efficient or productive, but will the quality be the same? And also, safety and quality often go together as well. So, competence, safety, identity, and this feeling heard, right? I know how I'm the subject matter expert in this area, and you need to listen to me about how quality could be affected by this change. And we know that people who are involved in building the change are much, much more likely to adopt the change. So this kind of feedback can be really great, especially if we bring people in before the change is kind of set in stone, or if we bring them in at a point where we can still, if it is going to threaten quality, well, let's make that change or tweak that change so that that doesn't happen. Predictability, yes, as well. This is just going to change again in a year. Someone before had made the statement about we go from decentralization to centralization to back to decentralization. That kind of falls into that area. Stability, predictability, belonging, feeling heard. And there's an interesting this feeling heard. There's also an interesting body of work that you might want to research, on your own time. And it's a relatively new field of research, and it's about the science of mattering. And it's led by a researcher named Dr. Zach Mercurio, who works for Colorado State University, I think. And he talks about this feeling heard, right? And the importance of people. We all need to know that we matter at work, and feeling heard is a lot of that. So sometimes a statement like this will just change again in a year, so I'm not going to bother paying attention to it, is an actual sign that people are feeling like they don't matter. So sometimes it leads to a deeper discussion or a deeper symptom than just that change. And then the last one, the people building this change don't understand how it really works. Feeling heard, competence, belonging, identity, competence. Yep. And I think, when we hear this, or hopefully we don't hear this, because as we are building the change, we have people who are building the change who do understand how it really works, right? So we have people who are from the impacted areas, the areas that are going to be affected by the change, and who are helping to architect it. Because one of the main a primary factor for sometimes why a change doesn't work is that those who are building it don't understand how it really hits the ground. Maduri says this is perhaps the most dangerous signal. Yep. Feeling that whoever created this change didn't really understand how it was going to work once it was implemented. So all of these are signals that we may need to, if people are feeling that, for instance, the people building this change don't understand how it really works, do we have subject matter experts on the team that is building the ship, as we often say in change management, who understand how this change is going to work? Okay, now we'll go to the next. So thanks for all of that great participation. So, one of the things about change is your culture is going to decide whether or not the change sticks. Because if you have a healthy culture with some certain aspects in it that I'm going to share with you, that means you're going to manage change in a particular way. So it's not, what I'm saying is not that if you have a healthy culture, well, you can be slipshod about managing the change and it's all going to be fine. If you have these elements in your culture, that is going to go a long way toward ensuring that you are managing the change in a responsible way and in a way that's likely to stick. So the first thing that has to be present in any organizational culture is psychological safety. So I can speak up, I can raise concerns, I can give you feedback on this change, and I won't suffer from negative consequences, right? There's not going to be any retaliation against me for speaking up. I can speak up about how I think the change could be better, or tweaks that you could make, or how it's being implemented, or I can speak up about how this is negatively going to impact me, and what support I'm going to need to be able to adopt this change. So that is absolutely the first aspect of a culture that has to be in place. And it's a good thing to kind of ask ourselves for where we work, for our own organizations, like how psychologically safe are our organizations? with the OKR example that I gave a few minutes ago, we had to say to our senior leaders, if someone down the line pushes back on, an additional workload because it doesn't map to the OKR that they have, or OKRs that they have to be safe to be able to say, I will not be focusing on that because it doesn't align. And that sounds really easy. And they all, and, many of them said, yes, 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 no problem. And then when, that started to come up, they, we had to remind them, right, that people, that's, we're building a psychologically safe environment where people can do that. So sometimes psychological safety can be a concept, but then you really have to make sure that you are deploying it, right? What if you do not have psychological safety? Should people not speak up or should they take a chance anyway? It's a good question, Angela. And um, if you don't have psychological safety, I would, I'm hoping that you mean it in a team. I mean, if an actual organization doesn't have psychological safety, I would like you to leave that organization as soon as you can because it's toxic and it's not going to, I don't know how a psychologically unsafe organization can actually even succeed commercially. If you have a team that doesn't have psychological safety, then I would think that that needs to be called out to HR. That leader needs to be coached about how, the practices to instill psychological safety. And I think if you don't have, and we know that 100% of psychological safety comes from the leader of a given team, right? They set the tone for psychological safety. They set the environment. They set, what will and won't be tolerated from a, psychologically safe point of view. And other people, then the rest of the team members, then emulate that behavior. So if you didn't have it, I would uh, work to coach that leader. And if you couldn't coach that leader, I would work to remove that leader. But people will not speak up. It's really not a should question, I think. They just won't. If they're not safe, they're not going to take that chance. So then the organization needs to do something to make sure that the team is safe. Denise, speaking up has power only when there is trust that others will listen. Yes. And one of the things that we teach within our Transformation Accelerator curriculum is psychological safety and trust. And trust really can't be built without psychological safety there to shore up or make the trust environment where trusting each other is possible. But it's a great point. So the next one is trust, right? So people need to feel that this is being done with them, not to them. And there are some changes that everyone is probably, most people are going to likely feel, it's being done to them, right? So if a company's going to downsize, that certainly would have people feeling that this is being done to me. And not with me. But even there you can take steps to ensure that you're, assisting people with helping them to try to find a new role, even outside the company, like with outplacement procedures, giving them enough time, lead time, making sure that you give them a decent package, those type of things. But most changes, are not downsizing. And most changes you can do a lot. We can do a lot more to to implement these changes with our people and not just impose these people changes to these people, to our people. So trust is really important. And then mattering. I was just talking about Zach Mercurio and his work, but I know why this change matters. I know um, what the change, why we're doing it, what the change will result in, what the benefits are. And I know how I matter. I know that I'm important to this organization and to helping this change happen. So those are just some of the, things that um, that we need in our cultures for change to work. Let's see. Marek is saying with us require bottom-up working formats by design from the start. Yes. And so often, like a change champion or a transformation network can help as well as just consulting teams, as you build the change. Okay. So following on from that, how change is led and experienced can be the primary driver of resistance, not the change itself, right? So it might be that the change is not that objectionable, but the fact that the way that it's maybe rammed down people's throats, or the way that it's handled can be a major cause of resistance. So this is a this graphic I took from LinkedIn. I asked the author if she would be okay for me to use this, which she was. Oops. Let's see here. Sorry. And so her name is Sarah Junio. And I thought this was a really good summation of why change fails. So often, as we opened this with, leaders often will misdiagnose resistance as defiance. And that gets them, instead of realizing that people are responding to a perceived threat and that our job is to decrease that threat to them, they treat it as defiance, right? They also increase control under stress. There starts to be more micromanagement, less autonomy, momentum slows down. We don't think about the human cost to this change. We don't address uncertainties because often people will raise questions and concerns about certain parts of the change that are not clear, and we don't do anything about that. We mistake compliance for commitment. And so what we'll often see there is like learned helplessness or quiet quitting. And this threat to people's identity goes unseen because they feel that their value and their competence is under threat. We'll also misinterpret silence as alignment and agreement. We actually ignore some early signals that the change is not being accepted. And so often, it's urgent. And so we dispense with safety, and whether that's physical safety or psychological safety, because it's urgent. We have to get this change done by April the 1st or October the 1st. And every time that a change is handled poorly, it erodes the trust for the next change, which means that the next time we have to manage change, it becomes that much harder because we have this bad track record. There's that saying about trust. It's a Native American saying, and it says that trust arrives on foot and leaves on horseback. And never is that more true than, when we're talking about how we manage change. If we don't manage it well, then there's no trust for the next change that we have to manage. Urgency replaces safety resonates with me at my org. I'd like to, can we turn on or help? Is it Denise who said that? I'd like to hear a little bit more about that.
Yeah, Danielle here. So Danielle, I'm gonna let you unmute yourself. All right, you should be able to unmute yourself now.
Can you hear me?
We can.
Okay. Hello, and thank you so much for this session. Really appreciate it. That one really resonates with me because everything is always very urgent here. Like we have to get it done by X date. It doesn't matter, if it's done well, it just has to be done on time. And that always just eludes me because I feel like we're always rushing. And the change piece it's very difficult to get people on board with the change when they always just feel like, okay, we're just chasing a date. And that's the most important thing. So that's where I was going with that.
Well, it's a great point. And I have a saying that might help you, which is because we have that, at our organization too sometimes. And I always say, okay, so you can pay now or you can pay later, right? With change. And paying now means giving us enough time to manage this properly. And if you pay later, it's like you're paying with interest. You pay in forms of the change is not adopted, you miss your budget, you miss your deadlines, you sacrifice trust, employee engagement suffers, so if you pay now and put a good change management system in place now, then it's much more likely to go. I think CROSI has a stat that change that's managed is 7 times more likely to succeed than change that is not. And I think Eric just said, sorry, the things are disappearing quickly, but he said they call that organizational debt, which I think is a great way to term it as well. So you pay later with organizational debt. So thanks for sharing that.
Thank you.
I'm just reading some more of the comments. Managers who urge quick and dirty forget the dirty part of the phrase. Yeah, and I really feel bad for managers, especially middle managers in all of this, because often they are so lost in the shuffle. It comes from sometimes a change. It's kind of architected at the top level, and then but the middle management are the ones who have to deliver it, and who have to face their teams and answer their questions. And it's really up to us as change managers to make sure that they're very well equipped to do that, and that we have a feedback mechanism to hear from them about how things are going. Kaushik says, CROSI has some great quotes for your scenario, Denise, and I presume you are probably past that phase. Yes, back to the office mandate. The only thing worse than being in trouble for your job is when your manager is in trouble for their job. Yeah, great observation. Okay, so I know I said I wasn't going to plug CROSI so much, but I am actually right now, because the ADKAR framework, I just want to go through that a bit more. And apologies to those of you who know it, but it really helps for us to understand ADKAR, especially in terms of resistance. So ADKAR basically is a 5-stage journey that helps us support people through change. So, and everyone is different, and everyone goes through this journey in different timeframes, right? But everybody has to complete every person needs to complete every part of this journey to really successfully adopt a change. So the first is that people need to understand what's changing and why. Like, if we didn't change in 6 months, what would happen? What's the burning platform? Like, why do we need to do this? And what are the benefits for the organization for doing this? And then they need desire, right? So they need to understand why we're making the change, how it's going to benefit the organization, and then what's in it for me, right? How will this change affect me? Is it an opportunity or a threat? If I perceive it as a threat, I'll never move past the desire stage. And each of these stages of ADKAR, you have to clear the first stage, the previous stage, before you can advance to the next stage, right? So I have to understand, what is the change? Why is it happening? What's the why behind it? As Simon Sinek says, start with why. Then I have to say, okay, I get this, and I can see that it will be something that is not going to, in the worst case, is not going to threaten me, and in the best case is going to be good for me. Then, if there are skills that I need, you need to give me those skills. Like, what knowledge do I need, or learning do I need to undertake, so that I can adopt this change? And then once I have that learning and that knowledge, what kind of safe environment can I work in before I start getting evaluated on my performance? Like, will I get dry runs, rehearsals, coaching? Like, what are the ways that I can use that knowledge and take it from just knowing the knowledge or learning the knowledge to actually being able to deploy it? And then the last stage of ADKAR is reinforcement. So, what do I get for adopting the change, and how are we celebrating the change being adopted? Often too, with reinforcement, I talk about, are there things that exist that are actually negatively reinforcing the change, so they are actually encouraging people to backslide into the old ways? And the example I like to give is, often with salespeople, we say, okay, we don't want you to sell your product anymore. We want you to sell across the whole company. But if we're still incenting our salespeople on selling, making their number for their product, then that will never change. And sometimes when we implement change, we don't take the time to think about, what are there existing mechanisms for reward or recognition or behaviors that we need to discontinue so that the change gets adopted. Because if someone is being rewarded for the old ways, there's no way they're going to adopt the new ways. So that can often be a huge, part of resistance is that the reinforcement is actually negative. We've still got something in the system that reinforces the old behavior. And the reason why I love ADKAR is that it helps you, the reason I love ADKAR with resistance is that resistance helps you diagnose which of the ADKAR elements you're stuck in, right? So if people are feeling, if the resistance is around, this is not good for me, it's going to, threaten my identity, and if people are talking about quality, for instance, you know that you're in a desire problem, right? Or if the resistance is around, this training is useless and I can't use it and I don't understand it, and where do I even find it? You know that the where you're stuck is in knowledge. So ADKAR can provide a really great framework for you to understand, for us to understand where where the resistance, the kind of resistance that we're getting, where that means we're stuck in this ADKAR journey. And then we can apply particular measures to help relieve that resistance. So I'm just reading the chat, which seems to be stuck for me. Okay, we'll go into the polls and I'll try to get the chat moving. And this is another poll in the chat. So I'd love to hear from you about where you often see resistance show up. And if you think about ADKAR, right, in those stages, or you can just generally talk about why you often see people resisting in your organization specifically. New everything, like so kind of change fatigue. Ability. So Angie, being able to take that knowledge and actually use it before you start getting assessed on it. Awareness, because there's not clarity. Let's see, I'm going to expand this so I can see. Desire, change, fatigue. Yep, desire. When teams need to reform with other coworkers. So that's kind of a collaboration issue, I guess. One-on-one conversations after the rah-rah meeting. Ownership, roles and responsibilities, decision-making. So a lot of that ownership, roles and responsibility, that's kind of in knowledge, right? Like how are we going to change things in our structure to meet that? It could also be desire. At leader level, they have no desire to change. The ECLC had a meeting with the head of Bayer a couple of weeks ago, the CEO of Bayer, and he talked about how they had totally changed their leadership model, and they had ripped out levels of leadership, and then they had put the budget and the resources and the decision making, 95% of it at the actual execution level, and how some leaders were like super resistant to that. Lack of top-down support for key changes. Roles being redefined without any communication. Isn't that awful when that happens? It shows up in every stage, but looks different. Liam, can you come on and talk about that a little bit?
All right, Liam, you should be able to unmute.
There we go. That's working?
Mm-hmm.
So,
yeah, I can hear you.
At my organization, resistance will show up in pretty much every stage of ADKAR, whether that is leadership not getting on board at the start, or people distrusting leadership right at the start, all the way through to reinforcement, but it looks a little different each way. Like at the start, a lot of times it's people are either maybe slow at getting back to you. They don't really want to keep going through exploring the different solution options, all those sorts of things. Whereas then at the end, it's, I don't want to do this. This isn't going to work. Right? It can be a little bit different at every stage that we go through. Sometimes the knowledge, even it's people won't show up to training because they don't think we need to do this anymore.
Mm-hmm.
It's part of my job.
Yeah, great point. If you don't get people to training, that's a big sign that they're not happy, right? That they're actively resisting. Thanks.
And
Thanks for that.
it's that like complacency of, I don't really care what you do, just make the decision. And those people are checked out and
Mm-hmm.
a flight
That there's
risk.
that learned helplessness, quiet quitting kind of thing. Okay. So the next question is, well, I think we kind of maybe answered it in a lot of what we just talked about, but which ADKAR barrier is most common in your organization? And Liam, to your point, it sounds like with many of us, it's across the whole system, and we have other chats like Ian saying knowledge is often, um, desire. So I think I kind of asked that question before, but we have one more left, one question more, so we'll go to that one. So, where do you feel resistance might actually be offering you a gift? So, if you think about when you see resistance, what kind of gifts have resistance given you in terms of insights or, things that helped you change course or understand something that you didn't before? I'd love to hear about that. Opportunity to open line communications. One person's concern helped a group of people because we were able to put in additional change management tactics. Gives us a chance to clear up rumors. Yeah, great, Danielle. Convert your strongest dissenter. Yeah, when a resistant person has a key insight that no one on the project team has had. And then when you listen, even when you can listen, and sometimes converting your strongest dissenter can be because you take that and you say, right, that's an insight we hadn't thought about. Let's change that. That's excellent. And often listening to people can often help convert them, because you're definitely going to get insights that maybe you haven't had. Ability to go back and do more work in an ADKAR phase. Resistance is engagement. I like that, Rajiv. It helped me identify the real reason I wasn't getting traction on adoption, and learning about the true risks that need to be addressed, and discovering the gaps. Yeah, so it sounds like maybe you guys didn't even need this seminar or this webinar, in that you're really able to identify when resistance is actually helping you, instead of this is, a hurdle that I need to clear that I wish I didn't have to deal with. So in closing, if I can get it, there we go. The final thoughts on it is that, resistance is a signal. It's not a problem. And signals are great. If you think about signals for planes or signals for, lighthouses for ships, we need signals to be able to land things safely. And behind every no is something that someone sees, that an impacted person sees as something worth protecting. So it's important to understand what that is. ADKAR can help us diagnose where the real barrier is or in the journey is. And change often threatens identity, and value. So we really need to treat it with care. And change succeeds when we listen before we push. And I realize I'm probably preaching to the converted or to the choir here, but it is a good thing to remember, and certainly something that when we're dealing with our leaders, that to this whole pay now, or pay later, and listening before we push is so important. And we have about 6 minutes left. If anybody would like to, if anybody has a question that we haven't answered or would like to make a comment. And Julianne, you probably see the chat better than I do. So
Yeah, I got a couple of different questions lined up. So yeah, thank you, Connie,
okay.
for this. So yeah, we
No
have
worries.
our first question from Jamie. Is anyone else regularly facing leaders, sponsors who want to implement stealth changes with zero enterprise-wide communications? I keep running into this, and it has been driving me absolutely bananas.
Wow. So Jamie, you have a leader who does really big changes but doesn't communicate. That's amazing. You seeing anything in the chat from folks about that?
We also have a question from Sherwood, which is this is an important challenge that they're facing, is effectively communicating to budget management the difference between having a human change manager and a conversational AI app, however well adapted. The AI app is tempting if the spreadsheet shows it will be less expensive. What would you recommend to that, Connie?
Well, I use AI a lot but I never use it for something like that. I use it to help me, often craft plans or if I'll sense check something. But the accepted thinking around AI is that it's great for tasks, but it can't, you can't really program AI to be human. And again, I think it's a case of, do you want to pay now or pay later? You can certainly have humans who are using AI to help with that interface, but I wouldn't risk, just delegating all of that to AI.
And we have a question from Christy. Have you ever recommended an organization stop a project due to
Yeah.
change management issues? Why and what happened?
I've recommended that it be paused, like we're not going to be able to meet, if you want this change to, if we want this change to succeed, we are not going to be able to meet that deadline. We need to take more time, and this is why. And this is where, if you can make a case for the data around, the burning platform about if we go now, what we risk, and if we go later, what KPIs we would show to show that it worked. Usually you can make a good case for that. Often people, often don't mean to rush change management, but they do. And it's up to us as change managers to say, you're going to pay the price because we don't have a good why. And I've actually often called in an external person to tell a senior leader that this why is really weak, and if I were an employee, I wouldn't get out of bed for this why. And sometimes that has been necessary. Not often. Usually I can make the case, but I will go to that extent if we need to. But that whole becoming a trusted advisor rather than order taker makes sure that it kind of ensures that we get the people understand that we're the experts in this, and so they will defer to our judgment.
Question from Norma. How do you address the resistance when it is coming from the top or key players?
Yeah, well, often the top or key players, involve them in number one, I would say involve them. If the top is not involved in building the change, I would wonder why. That would probably be my first. And then the second would be to understand why, just so as with any employee, why they are resisting, like what are their reasons behind it, to see if you can resolve some of those.
Have one last question. So Marie asks, is resistance maybe a signal that your listening efforts as change officer came maybe short or too late when designed into the process? They see it being more about listening less to resistance and questions in their vision, but listening more to key insights, novel experiences, intelligent predictions, and that type of thing.
Yeah. So often, if you again, it's the pay now or pay later, right? That's a great question, Morik. That if you're getting tons of pushback, if you don't listen and you don't listen and you don't listen, it may be that what could have started as a conversation becomes a shouting match, right? Because when people don't feel listened, right before they disengage, they will push, right? So it absolutely could be that you haven't listened previously, so now this resistance is showing you that you didn't. And I see we're right at time, Julian.
Yeah, we're right at time. So yeah, I'm going to say thank you, Connie. Thank you, everybody who attended today. Connie, if you have any last words before everybody heads out.
Just have a great day, and I hope that there'll be some insights in here that might help you. And I enjoyed listening to your insights.
Amazing. I hope everyone has a good day. And yeah, we'll send you guys the recording afterwards. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.